Welcome to Broadcast Astrology, Insight for Humans.
This is Lisa Pesnichak.
And I'm Sara Beckner, and we're here to deep dive into the fascinating world of astrology.
We offer blind chart readings, interviews with notable guests, and much more.
So keep listening as we bring you Insight for Humans. Welcome to Broadcast Astrology. We're back this month on the eve of Valentine's Day, and we thought it'd be a good idea to talk about love and relationship in the astrology chart. And so we've gathered here together, three astrologers, just to have a conversation about how we look at love, how we've experienced love within our own earth charts, and just to spend some time chatting, diving into the theme of relationships. So we have Berit Freutel with us today, a wonderful astrologer, a graduate of Astrology University, weighing in on her thoughts. And of course, as always, Lisa Pesnichak. And I guess we'll just dive in. Berit, I know you had some initial musings about the role of Venus in the birth chart. You want to dive in?
I want to dive right into love. Let's do it. I bought a new t-shirt because you invited me, and thank you for the invite. So I bought a new t-shirt. I don't know if you can read it. It says, "Love at first swipe." So
Very appropriate.
very appropriate, right? And then we also talk about that because we live in 2026, where love has a different phase, right, than back in the days. And maybe we should introduce ourselves with our love placements because everybody's excited. Valentine's Day. What should I look for? Let's stay pop astrology in my chart to know how I love, what I love, who I love, right? Personally, I think it is Venus, of course, that's easy. It is the moon because it's our deep feeling and our security, safety place. And it's also Mars because when we talk about love, most of the time we also talk about desire and sex after all. So I'm going to start and introduce myself astrologically correct. I'm a Venus in Pisces. I'm a moon in Capricorn, and I am Mars in Scorpio. Let's do the round, and then I go on my philosophy take about love.
Okay. I'm actually pretty similar to you in a lot of ways, Berit. I'm Venus in Pisces, a moon in Capricorn, but my Mars is in Cancer, and I have a pretty gnarly Mars in Cancer in my chart. Out of bounds, stationing direct, conjunct to my MC. So good times.
And I am Venus in Scorpio in the 6th house. I also have Mars in Scorpio in the 6th house. And my natal moon placement is an Aries moon in the 12th house.
Okay, in the 12th house. That tames you down. So we all have watery Venuses. So I feel it's very, and I'm not going to say that the watery Venuses know it all, right? But maybe they're the most, maybe romantic approach to love or emotional. And that brings us a little bit to the topic. Like, it's such a big question. Love, where do you start? What is love? Who sings the song? I wish I could sing, I cannot. But what is love? Baby, don't hurt me, right?
Oh, yeah.
Don't hurt me. So what is love? And I think a couple of things. First of all, I think love is different for different birth charts and different Venuses and different people and different souls. And then I also think that love changes as you go through life. When you're in love for the very first time, isn't that another song? For the very first time, that Madonna.
There's a lot of music, a lot of songs about love.
So many songs about love. So if you are in love for the very first time, you have different experiences and expectations and maybe also ways to live out these very placements, your Venus, your Mars, your moon, right? In your 20s than you do in your 40s than you do in your 60s. So these planets get wear and tear, like the whole birth chart, right? When you move through time and through life. And I think it's supposed to be like that. So your approach would be a different one if you do a client reading or if you're listening now and you want to know about your own love desires and who's compatible and who's not. to also check your actual birth year, like how old are you, right? And then a second question, and then I let you come back to that. For me, is also, what do you expect from love? Do you want a movie that lasts for a month or a year? Do you want something more? They called it like, I only know the German, like they call it like a partner for a period of time. Let's say for your 30s, for your 40s, or somebody to have kids with, and somebody to, like, do you want these stations, or do you want the whole love story for a whole life? What is your expectation of love? And maybe we can bring that back to the placements we see in the birth chart. But I think those are different questions to ask before you do a consultation or you go out in the world looking for love.
As you speak about the different love at different times in our life and the different planetary bodies, it makes me think that the Mars really might speak more to early love, the passion, because at that point in our life, we're really pushing ourselves out into the world. And most of it is according to our own desires and agendas. We're young, we're thrusting ourselves out there. And maybe the moon placement speaks more to when we're trying to establish a sense of home or a sense of family for ourselves, or for those that know they want to have children, the moon placement might speak more to those relationships. And maybe Venus is really the kind of love that just really wants to be in this kind of more harmonious simpatico partnership. And of course, that would depend on your own placement. But I do think about, you were the one, Barrett, in some of our email exchanges before meeting today that really got me thinking more about the role of the moon in matters of love, because I think the moon speaks more to, no matter what our nature is or what our sign placement is, as humans, biologically, we are driven for bonding. I mean, that is part of how we find security. And the moon is our physical body, and also as the planet that really speaks to some of our initial experience of love in our lives, how we received love, how we were nurtured in our early childhood environment. The moon might speak more to this. I was talking to Lisa a little bit about this idea of taskmates versus soulmates. The moon might be a taskmate, speak more to creature comforts, like somebody to take care of our physical needs in this body, to accompany us as just humans, cohabiting humans, and how we meet the fundamental need for security, for comfort, for connection, and how the moon, speaks to all of that. That's just some of my initial thoughts of looking at those different planets as it relates to the love story.
Yeah, I love that description of the moon. But if you don't have that solid connection in a moon way where you feel nurtured, where you feel like, because the moon is in many ways who you are when you're at home and when you're not out visibly in the world. And of course, that can have different variations for different people. But for the most part, that's what that moon is. It's our initial experience of connection as a child. And so we come back to that, as Sara touched on. And depending on how that moon is aligned with the rest of our chart can indicate maybe if that initial connection and that feeling safe with another person feels okay when we get into relationships. And we all bring our own baggage. And if you think about how relationships are just set up in the chart in the first place, where you have the ascendant, which is the native on one side, and the descendant, which is relationships on the other side, they're set up to have some sort of contention in it because they're reflective, which is very Venusian in its own right. So we're really, through relationships, learning about what's most difficult about ourselves, and can we bring our baggage into the relationship, and is there room for the other person's baggage, and how do we reconcile what that means? And that moon, I think, is really central to that because it tells us where our comfort lies and how we work through that difficulty. And then the Venus is like, how do we mend the difficulties that come up along the way? How do we reach across the aisle and share and move into that moon space as well? So those are my thoughts.
When I heard you talk, both of you talk about the moon, I felt, the moon is always comforting, and we have the mother, and we have this feeling safe and almost like a family feeling. And then I thought, oh my God, what about the sex? Where is the romance, right? And so I think the danger is that the more you tap into moon territory, and no matter which moon you have, right? Even if you have a fiery Aries moon, but the more you feel comfortable, the more Venus and Mars, the desire, go back in the corner and say, I cannot make love to my mom. No, I feel like that's too much family right? And
Yeah.
there is like an automatic, and again, this is like the mystery of love. And maybe we cannot even, not even astrology can help us solve it, right? But how do we keep this need for harmony? And I would even throw Venus a little bit in the mix with the moon, because moon and Venus want harmony, both on their own terms, depending on the houses and the signs and the aspects. But Mars wants the action, the desire, right? And the bodily functions. So how do we keep this magic or this tension alive? That it is harmony. Yes, we want a partnership. We want teamwork, but we also do want some kind of, how do you want to call it, excitement or magic or what they talk about in the movies.
And
Yeah.
and sorry to jump, but Mars is also the fighting. And if anybody who's been in any sort of long-term relationship knows that fights can be so critical to the relationship growing, and find that tension that I spoke to with the opposition, but also how do we reconcile those differences? And sometimes it just explodes into some sort of a disagreement, but that's also motivating us into that physical connection as well, where we can find that trust through the moon and the connection through the Venus and the attraction. So there is that other part of it too, where separation makes the heart grow fonder. There's this testing going on. There's this growth. We need to feel comfortable with who we're with, because the journey that we're going on within relationship isn't going to be a smooth ride. There's going to be peaks and valleys and confrontations with each of ourselves individually and one another. And so I think that Mars is that, fighting other thing. And that's part of relationships as well, is working through that tension with one another.
I appreciate that we're starting the conversation, fleshing out some of the complexity of this, because when people seek astrology about relationship, which is a very common thing, people are in early stage relationship, they want to know if it's going to work. What is working? What assurances are you really wanting? What is the purpose of relationship? Because relationship is advanced practice. And for those who have been in a relationship for any period of time, and like you were alluding to, Berit, it's not just about smooth sailing. They wouldn't even meet all of these needs within ourselves. It wouldn't meet the martial need within ourselves. It's not just about finding some agreeable partner, some good synastry, signs that float together. It's much deeper than that. And I think that some challenge is meant to be built into it for the purpose of our own growth. Like you were saying, Lisa, with the opposition within the chart that's inherent in the chart anyway. What are we really looking for when we go to the chart? If we're pushing beyond the good relationship, bad relationship thing.
Mm-hmm. I think like when we approach the chart, not only for questions of love, but all the big questions of life, right? It's all about this getting to know the self. Like the better I know, and this is why astrology is so magical, because it gives words and symbols to these places we feel inside, but we cannot really name. Without astrology, you go out into the dating world and say, I'm looking for love, but you don't take apart these pieces of you. And astrology gives us the possibility or the chance to actually look at how our drive works. What sign is it in? How does a Mars, my sex drive in Scorpio, what does it want, right? This part of me. And how does it relate to my Venus in dreamy Pisces somewhere in the sky? And do I feel the contradiction? Do I feel it? And then a Capricorn moon who wants partner to be on time and have their ducks in a row. These three voices within are on the dating app platform or sit at the dinner table when I meet this Mr. Maybe right? And I think the more I know about my own Venus in Pisces and the ways she can behave and what she wants and what she's dreaming of, and let her dream of all of that and not forbid it, and then still take the Capricorn moon. And the more I know these places and own them and experience them through relationships, because how else are you going to know more about it? The more I bring my real self that I'm aware of to the dating table, right? And the more I can also bring it into the relationship, I can create these very things myself that my Venus in Pisces dreams of. If I want everything to be in the foggy twilight and, the guy, then I can initiate it or set the movie scene, more or less. If I want depth in the bedroom, I can bring that and invite my partner to go there with me. So the more I own my own placements and know them, step number one, knowing them in theory. Step number two, then inhabiting them and really bringing them to the date. The more I can find love or fulfillment, I think, in a relationship with another person who also has their own placements to own and to bring to the table. So we see that it's so complicated. It's almost a miracle if that worked, I think.
Absolutely. No, I found it being married for so many years that what you were saying at the very beginning, Barrett, with how the older we get, our Venus changes and so does our moon. Our whole chart changes. And when you're in a long-term relationship with somebody, you experience their experience of their chart changing as well. And it's been so interesting to see all of the different varying parts of my Venus placement change and how I relate to it and what I'm asking from my partner through that. And it's definitely changed where early on I was much more idealistic, figuring out, like you're saying, all of the dreamy stuff, but it's become much more grounded in just figuring out how to keep the magic in my family's life in general and using that Venus and Pisces to do that and to keep peace, magic, beauty in all of our lives. And it's kind of like my job in many ways in the family. And so it's been redirected over the years. And it's been really amazing to watch that happen. And I think, like you're saying, if anybody is interested in delving deeper into that, it can be a really great exercise to see how your personal development is gone and also your partners, for sure.
I believe it's Esther Perel who says we will all be in 2 or 3 marriages, but you could just as easily say significant relationships in our life, whether or not you're married to one person or in relationship with one person. Because you will, even as a couple, that relationship will not look the same a decade in, 2 decades in as it did initially. So there is this constant sort of reinvention, not only based on how we live into the archetypal field of our planetary placements, but also just based on how they progress in the chart, how the astrology itself changes and pushes us into this evolution.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if we see a client and they say, okay, and we have these questions all the time. I met this Leo man. Is he a good match for me? Like, first of all, we named the places where we would look, and maybe we can go a little bit deeper into that. But also, would you actually do that? Like, would you recommend, or let's say, if we would go out in the dating world, you both are in relationships, I'm not, so maybe I go out in the dating world. Do I want to look at the chart of the person I'm meeting? Yes or no?
I don't think initially. What about you, Sarah?
I think it would be a compulsion, a driving curiosity.
Yeah.
Whether you should or not, I can't say, but I think there's such a hunger to want to know the other in the early stage of relationship. And I've sort of come to this place in my practice where instead of looking at aspects synastry aspects between charts, I think it makes more sense just to look at the charts as separate entities and flesh out some of the individual journey, what someone's chart says about love, their values, all of the things, their work, their rhythms, their health, and do the same for partner B. And then try to get a sense of where the inherent strengths and weaknesses will be, what challenges will arise based on their innate nature. Because I think when we start looking at aspects, it takes it out of the context, really, of the natal story of the individual. And it's not that useful. And things like when you learn synastry, you start talking about orbs and such, but in a way, orbs don't really matter. Like I think about in my family, we all have fire moons. So we know that there's something in terms of what nourishes us that is all going to be of that nature, regardless of the sign. We want to be inspired. We want to be motivated. We want to try new things. We want to push ourselves out into the world. We don't really need to look at exact aspect configurations to say something in that regard. But to get deeper and deeper into this question of, is this person right for me? Or would this be a sustainable relationship? I think you have to separate them and do a deep dive on the individuals.
Yeah, I think that the potential dark side of looking too early at somebody's chart who you're dating, I think you need to get to know them without knowing their natal chart at first. Give it a couple months to play out. It's like when you first have a baby, and it's just better to just get to know your baby before you pull out their natal chart and start dissecting it and figuring out what's wrong with them. And I think that especially when you're dating, and especially if you've been in the dating world and you're feeling jaded in the dating world, that you might conclude that somebody has too many problems and ways that you don't want to deal with and write them off much sooner than maybe those things that are challenging are the things that you need in your chart, in your learning experience. And I think if you go too fast into the astrological analytical stage, that you could miss something that's actually really important for you to experience in this lifetime. And I can say if I had looked at my husband's chart and knew what I was looking at before we got married and all of that, I might have had some second thoughts. He's got like a really intense partnership thing going on. And I've definitely had to work through that. And that's really aligned with like my own chart. And it's been incredible growing for both of us. But if I had known what I was looking at early on, I might have been like, nope, this isn't going to work. Too much work. Like, this is going to be too hard. So I think we need to be really careful when we're using astrology to analyze whether we should or shouldn't be with somebody. I think we need to allow ourselves to organically be in that world with one another and then take the approach like Sarah's describing, where you look at who is this person holistically and who are you holistically and how are the things that one person needs going to feed the things that the other person needs. And I think that you won't really have the ability to look at that in a compassionate way until you really get to know the person and have invested in the relationship somehow.
Yeah. And then we also go through certain transits. So maybe under Pluto transit or Saturn transit, we might attract a different partner than we would under Jupiter transit. And then maybe this Plutonic person who normally doesn't fit the chart actually fits the, see, confetti.
You're doing all sorts of things with your hands and the loves it. There's like thumbs up, confetti, the party over there.
But sometimes talking about the moon again, and we want security from a relationship or from love, but maybe we can also get like a spark, a spark of growth, of soul growth, that this soul came along at this moment, and it's a very Saturnian person in a Saturnian transit for a very, I don't know, Jupiterian chart. And maybe that's exactly the right person, partner for a limited amount of time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And thinking that abstract about it kind of takes it totally away out of, Venus and Pisces territory, where there's just the fairy tale going on. But maybe that is a different phase of love as well, that we take the transits into consideration that we are under.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's interesting to think of. I know that when Pluto was square my natal Venus, I had some traumatic relationship stuff happening that didn't last, but it was really important for the time to teach me about not being so fluffy, dreamy in my approach to relationships. And it really gave my super soft Venus and Pisces more of an edge to it and a really good deep dose of reality. So so there is, I think, really incredible reasons for our soul growth for people to come into our lives at different times that are illustrated through those transits. I think that's a really great point.
I may be saying this just because I have a Libra sun, but there's something of all the areas of life and everything we see in the chart. I find relationships most fascinating because there seems to be a stronger element of fate than other places. If you want to chart a new career and push yourself in a different direction, you can enroll, go to school for something else. If you want to take control of your finances, you can read a book and budget. But relationship is like one piece that we don't have control over. You can want the person and they may not arrive when you want them, or they may not be exactly what you think. So there's an element there. And I'm trying to think if there's some way in which the astrology really reflects this idea. And maybe part of it is just this oppositional thing that it is furthest away from us in the chart than any other factor, the seventh house. And so there's a piece that really brings in the question of fate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the chart does speak to that fate on some level.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I love what you said. That's an element that we obviously cannot grasp. It is so easy, or it's easier to find the right job or to find the right, even friendship, to find the right home, maybe. But this last domain and this is what we all, not only Venus and Pisces, but the whole world projects into this word, love, because it is such a mystery. There is like some glamour, glitter, and there is a longing. If we talk about Neptune, right, being the higher octave of Venus, there is a longing for heaven. And maybe Venus and Pisces gets closest to it. But there is a longing for something that we just cannot, right? That we cannot understand. And I wonder how much we should let that mystery be a little bit instead of trying to explain it to death, but still know thyself and the placements, etc. And then a second, now I'm jumping rabbit-like a little bit, what you also said, Sarah, about the seventh house. We have the seventh house of relationships, yes. But I think what most people really underestimate is this contract thing that's kind of glued to the seventh house, where it's not about the romance, but where it is actually about signing, yes, we're going to do this for a lifetime and we're going to, I don't know, get the handcuffs on, but the beautiful handcuffs, right? But we belong together one-on-one relationship. But the actual romance that I think these t-shirt designers dream about, and my Venus for sure dreams about, happens in the fifth house, right? Of play, of gambling, of a little bit of risk take.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we also
Good
have
chance.
the eighth house, right? Where it goes beyond the handcuffs, it goes really deep into the bedroom for sure, but also into the finances. This really merging together and becoming one in the eighth, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember it was, I think, Stephen Forrester who talked about this dance from the fifths of dating and being in love, and then moving to the sixth. Oh my God, the socks of this person stink. And then you go to the seventh, I'm going to marry him, and let's do it. And then the eighth, we really bond. And then you create a family and go back to the fourth house. And then suddenly you're in moon territory again. And then the challenge of what we had before, from getting too cozy and too comfortable and too familiar, to maybe going in the fifth house again at the second stage of Lisa, you said it, like in a marriage, you have like different rounds. So maybe then entering round 2 and getting from the comfortable moon coziness of the relationship out of the sofa. And I don't know, do date night. I don't know how you do it because I never succeeded. I always give up at number 7 already. I never want to get up.
I mean, you know what's interesting in that is that heartbreak is written into the story no matter what. Because by the time you get to the 8th house, it is the house of, yes, shared monies and resources, inheritance, but it's also the house of death. So when the bond goes that deep, nobody gets out of that relationship alive.
No.
It doesn't matter whether you separate because, you divorce, you part ways, or literally you die. But at that point, you merge into one, and there's no way you can get out of it without your heart just being ripped out of your chest on some level. And
Yeah.
when we're in the 5th house, we don't acknowledge that. Most people are like,
It's
"No,
too much
try
fun."
coffee. I'll have a date." We go in so glib, and it never ceases to amaze me how we're always willing to throw ourselves into that 5th house again. So in such a playful, lighthearted way,
It's one of
not
the best
holding it
places to
close.
be. I mean, kind of like we were talking about at the beginning, I keep thinking about how many, I think it's got to be at least like 90% of the songs that have been written are about love. And music is very fifth house, but also it's this way to creatively reconcile this intangible, uncontrollable, but yet so compelling part of our existence, and how to navigate the good times, the smelly socks, the oh my God, we're married. How exciting. But now we have this like karmic entanglement that I just will never get out of alive. And it's this emotional roller coaster. I really think it's the biggest, most emotionally volatile experience that we go through. Like no matter what version it takes, whether you end up getting married or not. I think that 8th house somehow grabs us all, whether you're there or not. Like we all become broken due to
Yeah. And I mean,
relationships.
talking about the songs, 90% I agree, and I only listen to love songs, are love songs, but most of them have, what you said, Sarah, a broken heart.
Mhm.
The broken heart, actually the stuff that makes the song really good.
It
Right.
is.
The song is better if somebody leaves the lover or the lover leaves them or some kind of new lover comes. Like the drama of it, maybe also fifth house, right? And the 8th house, they are kind of not about the same thing because the death in the 8th house is real. And the death in the 5th house is just on stage. It's like, oh my God, he didn't text, right? That's maybe fifth, whereas in the 8th house, he really betrayed you or something. Or didn't. But
Yeah.
even the heartbreak, and maybe that's part of this big word, love, is part of the getting to know the whole chart after all, because you cannot separate Venus and Mars and the moon, but getting to know our soul through these depths, going from heaven into the underworld, if you will, 8th house again. And then from there, coming up and throwing yourself, like you said, in the 5th house again, lighthearted. Maybe the heart is scarred, but to do it again, we want more of this experience. We want more of this, and then I'm Neptune again, of this heavenly experience that somehow brings us closer to this.
And I feel like there's that resurrection, even if you stay in a relationship. Like, I feel like even when you stay in a long term relationship, you experience a death of what the relationship was. And it's such a huge challenge that I think that a lot of people don't speak to is how do you navigate your way out of that and bring it back into the fifth house in some new way so it's fun again, because that's what everybody wants. But getting there, you really have to let what was there before die and trust that it's going to come out on the other end. And that's a really huge experience as well.
I think at this point, we have to mention that the 7th house is the house of open enemies.
That is true. Yes,
You
it
know?
is.
So there is a piece of working into those hard places that is built in to the system, is known to as far as what we're supposed to be doing in relationship. It's a way where we can openly hold that tension between us and the other. Because relationship, marriage aside, relationship usually implies some level of commitment. And I think it's that commitment that creates the safe container that on some level allows us to be the open enemy, right? The hidden enemies of the 12th house, that's can be more passive aggressive and covert because people don't have that sort of acknowledged commitment to one another to stay in those hard places.
Yeah, and it can be difficult if either one of the significators of relationship, either the native or the partner, is in either the 6th or the 12th house. And that indicates that there is that hidden enemy built into the open enemy dynamic. And that can make it really challenging because this person who feel like you're supposed to have this visible, combative, life building, loving relationship with isn't there in the way that you need them to be in order to work through that tension. And that's a placement that I find really interesting when I look at charts of people who are in relationship. It's better to have your enemy, your partner who's also your open enemy visible to you. Otherwise, that can get scary and mistrust can slip in. Fear.
It's still a fiction because as Barrett was talking about Neptune, like that longing, that divine longing is really for something whole and unconditional. And we mere mortals cannot love perfectly, no matter how much we want to or how hard we try. This is a place of duality, planet Earth. And maybe Neptune speaks to the non-dual, something whole, something beyond the self that we can never really grasp it. And so we do the best we can, but in relationship, maybe there's more of an acknowledgement that we can't always meet every need. Maybe that's a piece of the open enemy thing is we acknowledge the frailties of that and lean into the love despite despite our frailties.
And understand that there's a sacrifice embedded in it. Like there's this thing that comes to my mind is that in life, there's sacrifice embedded in nearly everything we do, but especially in relationship. There's sacrifices being made constantly. And what does that look like? How does that play out?
I was laughing because I heard in Sara the Libra talking when you said, that we cannot do it perfectly. There will always be like something that in the end, relationship is a compromise, says Libra, right? But Pisces, isn't it the quincunx? It doesn't accept that. Pisces says, no. It's not that Pisces is against compromise, but Pisces knows that there is something where we are perfect, where we are at this place where we all dream of, right? But as humans, as you said, we are here on this earth and we cannot get it right. First of all, because it's so complex and so many planets are involved, but also because we are human and we are not in heaven. We are not in Neptune land, but we long. And this is the word longing that is so connected to Pisces. Don't you feel it in your Venus?
Yeah.
It's so connected to something, this longing, almost like for the longing itself is a nice feeling, just to long, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if it doesn't exist, just to have this feeling of longing gives purpose, maybe love, this magic too, because it is never fulfilled. We cannot really conquer it. And maybe if we would be able to conquer it, it would be boring. Just like a job interview, right? We can conquer that, right?
Yeah. What we're looking for is intangible and it's not realistic. It's like a movie screen. If we take what we talked about with the music and how music's mainly about love, so are movies. Like, no matter what movie you watch, there's inevitably going to be a love story woven in somehow. Otherwise, humans won't watch it because humans want that tension and love. We want that drama. Yet, what music and movies represent is very Neptunian. It's something that is not real, it's fantasy. And being a native Venus in Pisces, and having a lot of other planets in Pisces, I have really struggled with figuring out what my relationship to reality is and what my relationship to fantasy is. Being disappointed is something that really consumed my life early on. Being disappointed with the world we live in, with partners, with just being like, but I thought that we were supposed to be nice to each other. I thought we were supposed to be kind and everything. I'm a Libra rising and everything's supposed to be balanced and we're supposed to find this peace and harmony. And what are these people doing? So, yeah, I think that we all have our own version of that. I think that Venus in Pisces is definitely one of the quintessential examples of that. What is reality? What is fantasy? And we're always navigating that when we're in relationship too. And the thing is that each person has their own version of what that is. And that's where it gets really complicated, is that each person has their own fantasy going into the relationship and figuring out how to navigate that long term.
So maybe
That
love
might
and
be.
relationship isn't the same. So maybe we have to separate them a little bit and find maybe love is more of a private thing then too. Apart
Hmm.
from the partner, that we find our own place of love and of this Neptunian connection to heaven, and then while still have a relationship in the real world with a real partner, with the compromises, etc., but not put all the eggs, the love eggs, in the relationship basket, right? But get some out and live them in your own way, in your own fantasy world. And that can be, it doesn't have to be art. It can be even meeting with a friend or going to whatever, or dancing. It can be a very private moment that we can call a date and love, but it's with ourselves in a way, right? And
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
relationship, or leave relationship more of an earthy level where Libra kind of lives, where it's a one-on-one relation. You say something, I say something. And when we meet in the middle, we can't have pizza every night. We're going to have sushi, pizza, right? That's a relationship. But
Mhm.
get the love, this big word that we started out with, out of relationship, which is contradictory because we think it's one. Maybe it's not.
I think it's in the Greek language that they have many words, love words. There's agape love, there's romantic love. We don't have the language around it.
Mhm.
But I think the fantasy really is maybe more heightened or more extreme with when you have Venus in Pisces. Like, yes, we all have a fantasy, Lisa, but do we all have the fantasy? Do we all have the expectation that can be met on some level? Because listening to you talk about sacrifice, I was like, oh, that's really the two sides of that coin. The longing, or not fantasy, but sacrifice. You were talking about sacrifice, is the longing and the sacrifice. Like, of course, if your fantasy is not being fulfilled, then any participation feels like a sacrifice. To live into the mundane aspects of the relationship, to have to show up in certain ways that are not poetic and beautiful and unconditional and harmonious, probably brings those themes of sacrifice more to the forefront.
Yeah.
So what do we do
Yeah.
with it? What is the quintessence? Should we go through Venus through the signs? So the listeners, I don't know your listeners, maybe they want to take something home for their own Venus sign. So we know Venus and Pisces is lost in fantasy land.
We could do a quick down and dirty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, sometimes I think about even less about the signs and more about the planetary ruler of the sign. So my Venus is in a Mars ruled sign, and so is my Mars, and so is my moon. And so there's a strong martial theme in terms of relationship in my chart. And I think that shows up as a need for a tremendous amount of independence. I want the independent partner. I also want the freedom to be independent. That is probably the top of my list of things that would turn me away or push me away, is the needy partner. So in some ways, I don't feel into the sacrifice bit of relationship so much, I think, because my chart has so much Mars. that I quickly abandoned relationships that required too much sacrifice. Mars draws the sword. Like, that's enough there.
Mhm. But that actually shows how much you know your placements and your chart, right? Because you know what turns you off and what turns you on, and how to bring the independence into the relationship. And having the dreamy Pisces that Lisa and I share, I learned how to bring my own, almost like I have a suitcase with Venus and Pisces stuff in there, like little tools that I use, in maybe a candle, things that make it a little bit blurry, like a filter over the whole day. And I can bring it with me, and I learned to do it over time better. I perfected my skill in doing that because I know it benefits both me and my partner and this whole relationship, the whole encounter, right? The whole date.
It's like a love language, the sign placement to some extent. Like, how do you give love? How do you receive love?
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. Yeah, I mean, Sarah, you also have Uranus right in between your Venus and your Mars as well. So,
But you know, in lots of ways, my chart looks like the chart of someone who would not be in committed relationship. I have
Mhm.
Venus square Saturn. My partner is in my sixth house, which is their 12th house. I have a lot of challenging things going on, but actually I think that has shown all the Scorpio placements demand a deep level of commitment and trust. And because it's a fixed sign, I think that mitigates some of this thing of Uranus sitting next to the relationship in my chart and
you,
the
you have a
Venus
lot of
Saturn.
you have a lot of fixed in your chart in general too, which is basically what you're still saying.
So it's kind of all in or all out.
Yeah.
And when I'm in, I need some space and I need some freedom in there, you know? But there has to be the trust that it's a safe container for that. Yeah.
Love it. So do we want to take it through the signs? Are we going to do that? So
Yeah,
we
let's
started.
take it through the signs.
So
You start with Aries.
as Sarah spoke to, Venus and Aries is
Yeah.
ruled by Mars and is a placement where there's this need for independence, an action-oriented romance, probably not as like sappy as a Venus and Pisces, but the people who I know who have Venus and Aries are actually much more emotionally soft than you'd think. Of course, there's always things to punctuate that in one way or another. But I think that that feeling of freedom is important regardless.
And maybe not too much thinking. I think a Venus in Aries would just jump in and do the thing and fall in love and then think about it later, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, right. So there's like this fiery energy of, I have never done this before. I'm going to do it. Let's try it out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's an
maybe
adventure.
break their heart, break their note. It's adventure.
Yes. And
All
then,
right. Venus in, should we move on to Venus and Taurus?
yeah.
What did Tony used to say about Venus and Taurus? Because both Libra and Taurus are ruled by Venus. But
Mhm.
Venus and Taurus is the earthy, roll around in your own stuff, kind of the more sensual, kind of gritty,
Not as
because it is
refined,
not as refined, the earthy Venus.
very creative
Um,
though.
Creative, sensual, probably in it for the long haul, and also probably really wanting to find the comfort in it too. Just the animal companionship of the partner.
And the pleasure. I think Taurus is
Mhm.
all about the pleasure. They eat everything, they put it in their mouth. Who said it? Can I eat it? Stephen Forrest said about Taurus. The next question is, can I eat them? It's very sensual. The sense smelling, tasting, feeling, seeing. So also beautiful, luxurious in a way. So it has to just feel good. And Taurus is fixed earth, so it has to be chill. No drama. Just don't make a freaking drama. Let's go out on a date, have a nice meal, have sex. That's cool. Right? Easy. Whereas like Venus and Gemini talking about Stephen Forrest. I don't know why Stephen Forrest comes to my head all the time, but I remember he said about it was the moon in Gemini, but we can translate it to Venus. He quoted a song talked about music from the Beatles called Julia. And the line was, half of what I'm saying is meaningless, but I say it anyway, just to reach you, Julia. Like the connection through the intellect, through talking. Talk to me, text me, talk to me.
Yeah. And on some level, the what of it doesn't matter. It's just using language as a way to build the bridges of rapport, to just try to make a connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Venus and Gemini, I think just Gemini in general is a fun sign. And I think that the curiosity of it, I think, is really what gets me. And the playfulness is really fun for me. I think that people who have Venus and Gemini, that curiosity and childlike connection is something that might be really important for them as well.
They probably really know how to flirt really well.
I was
They're
gonna
really
say
the
yeah.
best at flirting.
They've got some really good pickup lines.
Yeah. Okay,
we're
Venus
not
and
gonna-
Cancer.
Yeah, Venus in Cancer. Oh my God.
That makes me think of like the crimes of passion. Let's do its part. No, not to disparage the Venus and Cancer folks, because what a loving, warm, nurturing Venus placement.
And do you think, since we talked about the moon and the danger of the moon and being too much in the moon territory, that they need too much of the comfort? Or where's the spark of a Venus in Cancer? What is their, Gemini was flirty, Taurus was all sensual, Aries was fiery. What is the Venus in Cancer? What's their love language?
It could be loyalty to the point of one's own detriment, really. I'm going to stay by your side. Once the Cancerian takes you in, they've got your back.
Which is beautiful, actually.
Yeah, I think Cancer is a sign that has a lot of tenacity to it. It's ruled by the moon. If you think about the moon is very versatile in that it goes through all the signs quite quickly and it's always changing its light. And I think that there's a tenacity to that, like the ability to make its way through difficult things. And I think that's something that Cancer often doesn't get credit for, because I don't know, when you first said Venus and Cancer, the first thing I thought of, honestly, was like a fuzzy teddy bear. I just want to feel good and safe, and I want to curl up and let's get married and start a family. But within that too, and maybe this is my Mars and Cancer speaking, but there's a lot of protection around that a Venus and Cancer person. And that's what you were speaking to, Sarah, like the protection, but it's loyalty, but some of that bleeds over into Leo. But Cancer's protection is, I will be there for all of your emotional needs. I will be there to walk with you through the shadows because I know how to do that.
Yeah.
But also, don't mess with me because I know the Shadowlands well.
Yeah, Scorpio often gets the rap for being possessive. But when I think of the charts that I know with strong Cancerian themes, there is something a little possessive about the Cancerian archetype,
Yeah, it feels safe. It feels nurturing to have the possession in that way. And especially if it's being afflicted somehow, that can probably turn that into more toxic tendencies and things that people have to work through.
And also creating memories together. I think of the traditional side of Cancer, where they want to not only create a family there too, but also create beautiful memories and hold on to them and look at these old pictures and also keep them as little treasures in their treasure chest at the seaside with all the pearls inside, and almost like collecting pearls and then putting them on a necklace. And that's, memories of moments that you had in your relationships and keeping them close to your heart, right?
It's a beautiful way to love, is to be the keeper of the history, to hold the history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
like
we love
that.
Cancer. All of a sudden, we love Cancer.
Okay, Venus and Virgo. This
No,
is gotta be
Leo.
the
Leo,
most-
how can you
Leo.
say Leo?
Oh, Leo. Oh my gosh. I have to think of Leos.
So my son has Venus and Leo in a triple conjunction with the moon and Jupiter. And when I think of Venus and Leo, I initially think of him, but I just think of this warmth, the heart on his sleeve. But there's something about Leo in general, but also like Venus and Leo. There's glam and there's this need to be seen in some way, but also take that warmth that's brought in when you think about the sun that rules Leo and putting it out to those who they love. And that loyalty that Venus and Leo has is so beautiful and striking. I think that it's something that where Cancer's doing it out of this nurturing, emotionally oriented way, Leo's doing it just because that's who they are. And that's how they're oriented, is because they understand the sun rejuvenates and brings life to things. And they've been gifted with that, their Venus being in that sign, and they just want to share it with people. And it's kind of infectious, I think.
I think
Yeah,
they
and
love.
Yes.
It rules the heart. And there's something so generous. I think they can also be quite extravagant in their demonstration of love.
Yeah. They need recognition and a good attaboy. They need to be fluffed up every once in a while because I think that they can give more than they receive sometimes.
And I think the cheerleader quality of Leo is often underrated because they want to be in the spotlight and on the stage, but they also can put this bright light, the sun, on their lover, on everybody else, and then light them up like with a fat shine on this person, on the lover. And then both of them are actually shining. And it's almost like these celebrity couples that both have radiant skin and beautiful hair and all of that. And it's maybe one Leo or Venus can do it for both of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great placement. Okay,
Now we can go to Virgo.
now we can go to Virgo. Venus
have
and
a Virgo.
Virgo.
I have a Virgo anecdote with Tony because we spoke about Tony from Astrology University. He has a Venus in, does he have a Venus in Virgo? I think so.
I think he has everything in Virgo.
Yes, so for sure.
Oh,
he's
yeah.
Venus too. And I remember the story that he told with only one red rose as a sign of affection, this humbleness of Leo, and that when they say, I love you with this one rose, this rose is really picked for you and they really mean you and they don't spread around the compliments like maybe Gemini and they don't flirt, but it's a very pure in a way. Maybe it looks reduced and it looks a little bit like stiff when they stand there with this one rose, but you can be sure that this rose is picked with so much love that they really mean you.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. I think about just service as a love language. There's something I think about service built into the Virgoan archetype. And also, they probably know something about relationship hygiene, how to tend to the relationship in a way that keeps it healthy and sane. They probably
the socks
schedule
don't
date
stink.
night.
The socks don't stink.
The socks don't stink. Maybe they schedule the sex. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Venus and Virgos are a bit more kinky than we give them credit for, honestly. And when I think of all of these Venuses also have to do with our aesthetics and our style. And when I think of Venus aesthetic, it's pared down. It's very thought through and also doesn't like the clutter. It only likes what's necessary. And I think that being in a relationship with Virgo brings that forward, like what is necessary. You know that you're interacting with the things that are important in that relationship. But also, it's an earth sign. So it's tangible, okay with the dirt. And even though it wants to clean it up afterwards, like it understands the tangible, sensual parts of life too. I think there's a real deep sensuality to a Venus and Virgo's approach.
Love that.
Yeah.
Libra. Libra
right.
is the second sign that's ruled by Venus, and we have an air sign, right? So it's maybe they write all the rom-coms in the world. So maybe they do approach love in a more intellectual way. But also, I always find Libra so polite. If anybody has good manners and knows how loud your voice should be, or when you should interrupt somebody or not. So they have this dance of me and you so perfectly, almost curated. not perfection, that would be Virgo, but it's really harmony, like a dance between me and you, and I'm not going to step on your toes. It's not going to happen, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's some kind of refinement there, no? And just a deep value for the relationship, the ability to really prioritize that connection.
Yeah, I think Venus and Libra, like you were saying, Barrett, definitely is of all of the signs, it understands social niceties more than anybody else. And I think that does bleed over to relationships. There is this stereotype about Libras because they're taking everybody else's opinion or where they're at into account that they can become quite indecisive. But I think in relationship, I think that is part of Libra's biggest challenges because Aries is on the opposite side and Aries is the fire sign pushing for what it wants and Libra is listening to that, but Libra also needs to find its voice in a relationship instead of just listening to everybody else's. I think that's part of the Libran journey is to understand that they have a fiery voice inside of them too. They are an air sign and their voice matters as well, I think is really important for the Venus and Libra. That sometimes some imbalance isn't a bad thing. So, Sarah, why don't you take us into Venus and Scorpio?
Venus and Scorpio, I think there's an element of deep feeling, deep devotion, and a need for real intimacy. No substitute will do. No trinket, no trifle, no. I wonder about contrasting it to Libra, which comes before, like maybe Libra would be satisfied to those quintessential, stereotypical displays of romance, like you bring in the flowers, you whatever. That's not going to work for Scorpio. Like,
Maybe
it's
there's
out
even
of
like a, sorry, maybe there's even like a nakedness. I'm just thinking about my own Mars in Scorpio or Scorpio, the archetype. There's a stripping down and standing naked in front of each other and looking at each other's truth. That's who we are, like on a very deep soul connection level. And that's very, very vulnerable. I think Scorpio is one of the most vulnerable signs because if you stand there naked with, the whole thing, and the other person sees all your psychological nakedness, they also can stab a knife right in there. So I wonder if the broken heart of a Venus in Scorpio is the most broken heart of all. I mean, there's a ranking, but I wonder because there's so
Yeah.
much at stake.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. When we were all in Boulder together several years ago, we were doing an exercise at that retreat where everybody was getting together with their Venus, everybody who shared Venus in the same sign. So I was in there with the Venus and Scorpio folks, and the idea of serial monogamy came up a lot. Like everybody there, because in order to bear yourself to that level, you have to feel really safe, you know? So dating multiple people all at the same time or keeping things light or just on the apps, I think is harder for a Scorpio Venus to navigate because they need the intensity and the safety.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely think that Venus and Virgos are the most vulnerable of them all, which is probably why they wear black. They're like,
What are you saying?
well, from an aesthetic standpoint, Venus and Scorpio tends to be more gothic, tends to have the black lipstick, the black. I mean, you are wearing all black today, from what I can tell, Sarah.
You got me this sweatshirt.
And I did. But there is this covering up because of that vulnerability. And whenever I work with people who have a strong Scorpio statement in their chart, that's usually something that comes up is just that feeling of they know the depths of the abyss. They understand what death looks like in some way. They understand the vulnerability that being human comes with. And how do you navigate a world that can, like Libra, who can work on the surface? Like Libra can skim the surface. And I think that's kind of the shadow side. And Scorpio is probably looking at Libra like, I wish I could just live on the surface, but I'm in the depths of the abyss. And how do you bring that into relationship, which, as we spoke to, is such a ride of inconsistencies and not knowing and the vulnerability involved in relationships. goes hand in hand with the vulnerability in Scorpio. So
And you also talked about, you have Aries and Scorpio, right? Sarah, and both are ruled by Mars. So I think there is a courageousness in a Scorpio Venus as well. And maybe Venus in Aries jumps right into the romance and gets the lover at home at the first night and then goes all in, but in a different way than a Venus in Scorpio would go all in. Even if it happens in the first night, it's a different courage that comes with Scorpio, Mars ruled, right? Than the courage that comes with Aries. And again, I don't know which one is more, but talking about vulnerability, Scorpio has more at stake there in terms of being courageous and going into love.
that's why they're the sharpshooter. They take the one shot and they don't miss because they understand the repercussions.
All right, Venus in Sag.
Another shooter, right? But that guy has more.
Totally different.
Yeah. And you always have to think of Jupiter and Zeus and having all these arrows and all these I'm going to say sperms like everywhere in the freaking world. So the more the merrier. I think they're very open to adventures and want love to be exotic in a way and open new horizons for them.
They also, require a lot of freedom in relationship. And probably a lot of novelty to keep the embers alive, the adventuring together.
I know Scorpio's sun, and we're talking archetypes after all. And I think the humor that they bring sometimes, you can laugh or you can cry, but sometimes Sagittarius brings so much humor into a situation that it takes the drama out. And we just come out of Scorpio land where this is not funny. This is like serious business. But then Sagittarius as the next sign brings it not in a ridiculous way, but brings it out of this depths into the sky and adds, in a way, a light-heartedness. If you think of all three fire signs, Aries being the match, Leo the heart of the campfire, and then Sag is these little spikes that go everywhere, right? And that's exciting.
Yeah, I think Venus in Sagittarius can bring the optimism and give you the wider view. We just came out of the underworld and it's like, wait, we have this whole world to live in. It's wide and there's landscapes and we can climb mountains and we can sail across seas. And I think that's in some ways being both Jupiter ruled Sagittarius and Pisces have in common is this looking to the bright side of things. And it brings this lightness and this hope for the future to the relationships, which can be really great if it's grounded, but can also sometimes I think the shadow side of that can be having a grass is always greener perspective when they're in relationship. It can maybe make them less able to commit sometimes, depending on how the chart's set up. But overall, I think it's a really fun placement for Venus to be in and less consequential in some of the more obvious ways. Of course, there's consequences to every placement because we live in a varied world. But yeah, I think it's a good one.
If I think of Venus or romance is looking into the other's eyes, into the lover's eyes, but I think the Sagittarius Venus, they both look to the horizon. So maybe it's not looking at each other, but both looking in the same direction at a sunset or something and still being together, but not like this, but more like we're going in this direction.
Yeah, and having like big goals. And that's what carries the relationship is what goal are we reaching towards? What horizon are we reaching towards? It's a really nice way to put it, Berit.
Venus in Capricorn. Oh, I know somebody with Venus in Capricorn who said, you know what I'm looking for in a man? Somebody that would do chores with me. Like that's at the top of your list. You want somebody to do projects and yard work with. But I think there's a thing about Venus and Cap that the work might be a piece of it. Or sometimes, I mean, aside from that story, just feeling that love is hard. The work is a requirement for the love. It's a serious placement coming off of Sagittarius. I mean,
Yeah, I think it's similar to Sagittarius in that it does have the goals, but instead of them being on the horizon, we now have the to-do list and in the steps to get to where they're going. And so I think that there's that similarity slipping into Capricorn. And when we first stepped into this, I had this image of a high-end handbag. There's this, as far as aesthetics go, Venus and Capricorn can look at two handbags and know immediately which one is the knockoff because they have this fine-tuned eye to what the details are and understanding the value of things. And I think that they bring that into relationship as well. And Capricorn also has a really fun, dry sense of humor too. So,
Oh,
There
yeah.
might be something more traditional about the Venus in Capricorn since it's ruled by Saturn
mhm.
in terms of commitment, or even thinking about the structure of relationship systems or family systems. They may show up in a more traditional way.
Mm.
And maybe being Saturn road, they also maybe have the maturest approach to relationships. When we always say relationship is hard work. Yeah, it actually is, but maybe Capricorn isn't surprised. It's like, okay, but that's not a turn off.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of hard work, and work can be very fulfilling because it shapes the character of a person and maybe the character, the backbone of a relationship. And that sounds always so cold and sober, but it's a feminine earth sign. So it's one of the sensual signs, and it's the freaking goat. So there is some lustiness too in the Capricorn, right? But
Yeah.
they don't make a big deal out of, yeah, for sure. Of course it's work. What else is new? But it's not a turn off, right? Where like maybe the Gemini would be like, "Zip," or the Sag, right? But the Capricorn will stay and not make a big deal out. Just get it done. Arms up and do it.
Mhm.
I mean, let's hope so.
Yeah, it always depends. If you have that Venus and Capricorn conjunct Uranus, it's going to change the expression of how that shows up. But still, I think when in Capricorn, there's going to be an orientation towards let's get this done. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to create and manifest in my lifetime. And doing that with partners, such as your example, Sarah, with doing the housework, might just be I want to do physical work and create, contribute to my surroundings and my life with my hands and my body with my partner. And could just be something as simple as that.
And even perhaps able to shoulder a lot of the responsibility of a relationship.
Yeah.
And also
Yeah.
make it lasting. I don't think they give up very easily. They want to build something that lasts, right?
Mhm.
So maybe they're a little bit cautious before they go into a relationship. But once they decide, okay, this is it, and we're going to do it.
Mhm. Yeah. It's a good quality.
All right. Venus in Aquarius, the enigma.
I think of all of them, Aquarius, yeah, it is an enigma. It's ruled by Saturn, so it has some of those Saturnian attributes for Venus, but it's potentially more eccentric. It's an air sign. So, again, like we were speaking to with Gemini and also Libra, a lot of the connection has to do with conversation and communication and information. And the Venus and Aquarius might love to sit down with their partner and read the news or study or something, getting into the weeds on what information's out there and sharing one another's perspective could be something that really is interesting and alluring for a Venus in Aquarius.
I wonder
Yeah, I
if a
always think,
Venus,
go ahead.
I'm wondering if a Venus in Aquarius would not be able to withstand a boring partner or a partner who's straight laced, just because you have that oppositional dynamic between Aquarius and Leo. They probably want the interesting partner and
Mhm.
probably somebody who engages and stimulates them intellectually as well.
Yeah.
And when I think about Aquarius, I always think about friendship. So maybe the lover is a friend and the friend is a lover, and they go in and out of friendship and lover and don't really put a label on it. And it's a unconventional relationship, maybe even in age. I think of Harold and Maude, like a big age difference or background difference, like the punk and the professor. It's something that doesn't fit, but then fit, right? Because it's a different approach. It's always like the differentness from the norm. So everything that's the norm, no, I don't fall in love that way. I'm going to fall in love with, or even with a plant or something, like weird, but why is that not love? Who makes these rules? Aquarius.
Quirky.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that takes us back to Pisces.
Here we are, Berit.
Our favorites. For me, favorites.
This podcast is brought to you by Venus and Pisces.
I mean, they say Hollywood and glitter, and I can see all of that. But my favorite word for my Venus and Pisces is what I said before, is the longing for something. And I feel that the art of longing is listening, is actually dreaming about the lover more than actually meeting the lover, which is kind of hard because you want to have a date. Yeah. But the date is not as important as the whole work up to the date and what I imagined the date will be like. And then if I see them, hopefully very briefly, so he doesn't kill my fantasy, then I have to go off with the fantasy and listen to songs and replay the whole date scene like forever. And that scene changes, when in my fantasy, it wasn't the scene that actually happened, right? And I also remember that there is no reality. I remember when I met one boyfriend where we walked to each other in slow motion. And it probably wasn't, not we probably walked, but for me in my fantasy, how I met this man, and it's still like that, was slow motion. It was almost like a movie was being made out of this encounter. And I still feel it like that. But if you ask him, he tells a different story. So it's the furthest away from reality. But I don't want to miss this place in my chart and heart and where it can take me.
Yeah. I said before, Venus and Pisces and Sag and Pisces both what they have in common is that they're Jupiter ruled and that they're looking at the bigger picture. But I think that Sagittarius's picture is like mountaintops and big landscapes and that sort of thing. And I think Venus and Pisces, like you're describing, Berit, is very much the liminal, the dreams, the fantasy world. And that's where they live. There's this understanding that they'll never get there, but there's this real enjoyment of being in that place. And I think that the optimism and the joy that comes from being in that place is really wonderful. And as you were describing that, it made me miss the days when I was dating because that's a whole thing. And I think it's like that for a lot of people. But I think that there is something about Venus and Pisces that just doesn't get out of bed for days. Don't let me meet you too much because you will squash my vision of who I want you to be. But there's also the possibility of not really seeing who your partner is and then all of a sudden reality kicks in, which is every Venus and Pisces nightmare. And you're like, oh, your socks smell and you snore all night and all of these other things, and a lot to navigate with that. But I think that once the Venus and Pisces settles in, there are ways to continue that magic and use the skill of Venus and Pisces to nurture those around them and bring happiness and joy and new visions to everybody around them. So yeah, it's a good medicine, I think, but also painful sometimes too. I think of all of my planets, my Venus and Pisces is one of the most difficult ones because of that.
There's always this martyrdom too, right? With Pisces.
Oh, yeah. Self-sacrifice.
You see the gold in every soul, which is beautiful and very Neptunian. But by seeing the soul in the artist that will never make a living, but you earn all the money and help him because his art is so beautiful, because you just see this beauty and all your friends see, well, he's also not getting out of bed. He's not even trying. But you just see the
Potential.
potential. And it's hard to draw the line unless you have some other Capricornian placements, to get you out of this, then giving up on yourself and going into giving your last shirt for the idealized lover.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is for sure. Well, hopefully that answered anybody's questions about how their Venus sign may manifest in their own lives. And I'll say, as far as partnership goes, like, I think I see more partnerships with people in the same mode. So whether that be cardinal, fixed, or mutable, than I do with the elements, which I think is interesting. I don't know if you guys see similar things in your clients, but uh, I mean, I see both, but I think that's the one I see the most, is that people with more of a fixed tendency tend to be more with someone with also with fixed energy and so forth. But
That makes sense to me. If you think about those modalities as basic operating systems or operating modes, then that's so fundamental to how we approach life that it does seem like that would be important for the synastry.
yeah, yeah. So don't get too attached to what you read online, because this is so complex. Like, we've kept it pretty simple. And I know sometimes when you go online, it's like, Cancer should never be with a Sagittarius. And I don't think that that's actually true. There's so many different nuances to each person's chart. Consult with your local astrologer before you dive too deep into thinking that your partner isn't the one for you because of what astrology says. So,
Astrology is so holistic and so complex that it really cannot be reduced to single factors. So while it's fun to take a planet through the signs or to look at things in a real chart, you really have to take that Venus or that moon or Mars in context of the whole.
Yeah. But I think it's always a great starting point for people listening who dives into astrology a little bit to really get to know these archetypes and then listen to the voices within themselves. Because what we just did, like going through the circle of the archetypes, isn't only true for Venus. You can do the same for your Mars. You can get curious about your chart and just say, oh, my Mars is in Gemini. What did they say about Gemini? And then you get a mini feel for these energies inside. And that is, I think, step one to getting more aware of your own, how you show up in the world and also in relationship, and what you bring to the table and how you can bring those parts to the table even better and refine them year after year after year after, ideally.
yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a good starting point for sure. But also, if you didn't identify with any of the ways that we described that, you could, like I said, you could have like Uranus conjunct your Venus or Saturn or something that is throwing off or modifying the expression of that as well. So don't despair if you're not identifying with the way that we're describing it. So, all
Thank you
right.
so much, Berit, for joining us
Yeah,
today. It's so
thanks.
good
That
to
was
see you
fun.
again.
Yeah, I really, really loved it. Thanks for having me.
Of
Thanks for
course,
talking
thanks.
about love. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, when we were trying to figure out who we were going to have on for this one, you were the first person that came to mind. And yeah, and then I remembered your chart later on. And I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. Why?
I love that topic.
Yes, yes. And I
Venus.
love that you wore your shirt today. Thank you for representing. And
This is
yeah,
real.
yeah,
Everybody. Yes.
yeah, totally real. All the way through the eighth house.
And to the fourth, and then one more round.
Yeah,
And one more round.
exactly.
Even if it's not the same partner.
Yeah.
Who cares? It's still you, because this person doesn't change, right?
Mhm.
That's
This one goes from relationship to relationship. And this is exchangeable or not.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
happy Valentine, everybody. And
Happy
Yeah.
Valentine's.
even if you don't have a partner, you can, I think, celebrate your own Venus placement and maybe take this Valentine's date as an opportunity to either contact your local astrologist or dive into your chart yourself a little bit and search for that Venus and just think about it a little bit. Feel into it is, I think, the better word, right?
Yeah. So Berit, before we go, let everybody know how we can find you, and we'll put your information in the show notes. Let people know where you're at, what you do, all the things.
All the things. I'm between Los Angeles and Vienna, and you can find me under the Uranian approach. And my signature is this rabbit, which to me
So cute.
represents part in my chart that I seem to be very proud of because I label everything with this rabbit. This is square from Uranus-Jupiter conjunction that I have. But I'm a Capricorn, so I will answer all your mails on time. I will show up on time. I will do my job and take it seriously. And you can follow me on Instagram. That's the funnest way. It's called the Uranian Approach. And yeah, I hope to see you there.
Beautiful.
Or in LA or in Vienna in person.
Well, thanks for being here today, Berit. And thanks everybody for tuning in and listening. And Sara and I will be back next month for another episode. And we'll see you all then. Thanks again. Bye, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
As always, thanks for listening to Broadcast Astrology, Insight for Humans. If you're so inclined, like, follow, and subscribe, and don't be a stranger.
Signing off for now. Until next time, humans, keep your gaze upwards on the stars and be well. We look forward to sharing more soon.